the fact that the fighting escalated so quickly and there was some concern about the nuclear exchange potentially taking place, is this the new normal? Are we going to be stuck in an endless cycle of sort of attacks and responses? Will this help deter future attacks, or do we have nuclear brinksmanship coming up more and more?
I think what happened was so far short of anything remotely approaching a nuclear threshold that the proposition, frankly, is laughable. Our Pakistani friends, I think, like to dangle this nuclear bogey to get all of you excited and anxious. But I mean, if we've got a nuclear power engaged in a war right now for 2.5 years in Europe, and no one has talked about nukes yet. I mean, why would 2.5 days in India suddenly lead to fears of nuclear escalation? And when you think about conflicts between India and Pakistan, there have been 4 wars. And though this is a frustrating and unavoidable incident, it isn't anything like the wars we are talking about in the past. There's been one war since both countries went nuclear, the Kargil War of 1999. And that went on for a month almost, and nobody talked about nukes. This nuclear thing is a bogeyman, and I would urge people not to worry, because, I mean, why would anyone assume that the first option India, by the way, has already decreed a policy of no first use. So India, in any case, would never brandish a nuclear threat. Pakistan has not declared any such policy. In fact, they've implied the opposite. But we'll have to really wait for them to start seriously threatening this before anyone takes them seriously. And I honestly, on this particular point, nothing we did was an existential threat to Pakistan. It started off as calibrated retribution, and it ended up with some punitive actions against their misbehavior, but nothing more than that.
But they did want to elevate that, and according to the press reports, that's what got the United States and some other countries more energized to try to facilitate a ceasefire.
Yeah, well, I think that if anyone needed persuading to stop, it was the Pakistanis. And so, I mean, I'm not privy to what happened between the US and Pakistan, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of the messaging from here resulted in precisely what you're suggesting. We didn't need persuading, because from the very first day, and this is on the record because I'm not talking about anything classified here, it was right there from the very first briefing given after the initial strikes. Our message was all throughout: we are not interested in a conflict. We are just showing the terrorists and their handlers, their bases, their launch pads, what's what. This is the price you're going to have to pay. And honestly, every single day, to anyone who asked, and we had, if you look at our foreign minister's Twitter timeline, you'll see so many foreign ministers calling him and so on. Message exactly the same throughout. If they stop, we stop. And so the moment they signal they'll stop, maybe thanks to the US, in which case many thanks, we stopped.
Right. You know, it has been widely reported that Pakistan used some of its newly obtained Chinese technology in terms of jet fighters and missiles, and that India used Israeli drones. It had its S-400 air defenses provided by Russia. It had use of its BrahMos missiles. Were there lessons learned in terms of the capabilities of these technologies? The Pakistanis claim to have shot down some Indian Rafale planes and to have damaged or destroyed one S-400 system. And is there any concern that China is learning lessons from the use of its own technology against India?
I mean, you're quite right about the last part of your question, that the Chinese have supplied 81% of Pakistan's defense systems. Or defense is the wrong word, offense systems in many ways. And that 81% is pretty much everything sort of at the cutting edge that Pakistan possesses. I'm not privy to the military analyses of everything that went on. I'm sure, to answer the beginning of your question, that there is a serious amount of assessment taking place. But I think the way the conflict ended speaks for itself. That is that if there were initial strikes from the other side, clearly India was able to breach Pakistan's air defenses and hit their own military fields, and what is more, do so. One of them, the Chaklala or Air Marshal Noor Khan Air Base, is 1.5 kilometers away from their general headquarters of the army in Rawalpindi. So we're talking about an exposure of Pakistani vulnerability that may well have provoked them to come and offer that truce. I mean, I think when you look at the way it evolved, I suspect that our people were quicker to learn lessons while the conflict was going on than the other side. And the results, I think, are pretty clear. In fact, recently the Pakistan Prime Minister made a statement revealing the fact that Indian strikes had gone much farther than Pakistan had anticipated. There were apparently attacks on places as far apart as Hyderabad in the south of Pakistan and Peshawar in the northwest. So you're looking at a pretty impressive demonstration of Indian military capability. Beyond that, I just don't know what the military is talking to each other about.
Let me ask one last question and then open up to the floor. Throughout the crisis, the media in both countries provided diametrically opposed assessments of what was going on. Some of it was highly exaggerated, and this was done even without the use of artificial intelligence. And perhaps those different messages enabled each side to claim victory and move forward. But it also raises the question of crisis communications and whether there needs to be enhanced efforts by both India and Pakistan to be able to communicate what's really happening to each other rather than having the media control the narrative. And is this an issue that the two countries are discussing? Is it left to the back channel between the Director Generals for military operations? But what more can be done to have preventive measures from having an escalation continue uncontrollably?
Difficult in democracies, Ken, as you know, because we saw much less of artificial intelligence than we saw of natural stupidity. I mean, if you followed some of the social media accounts, there were, we had bombed Karachi, we had taken Islamabad, God knows what else people were claiming on social media. And I believe that the Pakistanis were no better. There was a lot of nonsense going around. It's partially sort of hyper excitement in the middle of a conflict, partially, I think, the fog of war. But what was good on the Indian part, and I speak only for the Indian side because I wasn't aware of what's going on the other side, was there were regular systematic briefings conducted by our foreign secretary, the senior civil servant in the foreign ministry, and two military officers. And when necessary, more senior military officers. The two military officers, by the way, were both women.
Yes.
And one of them was a Muslim, just to make it very clear. This is not India, Pakistan, Hindu, Muslim, any of this nonsense. It is united India against terror. And that message came across very well as well. But just to say that at the bottom line, India did what it could to put out an official version. And sensible people relied on that. I mean, I personally didn't watch anything else except what was officially coming out, because that's at least reliable, verified, and we know that it's true. Crisis communications, for us, DGMO is the hotline. We do have sort of residual high commissions in both countries, so diplomatic messages can be passed if necessary. But at this point, frankly, when you're fighting and you're actually shooting at each other, the best thing is to leave open the hotline and leave everything else off the table.